Good evening. I'm Marty Krause, Provost of Brandeis University. It is my great pleasure to welcome all of you, and especially to welcome our celebrated guest, Mr. Amos Oz, here tonight on behalf of President Reinhardt's, who unfortunately is traveling on the West Coast. Mr. Oz, you can see by this huge turnout that your visit to this campus was eagerly anticipated. In addition to this packed hall, there are many in the Shapiro Campus Center and online who will have this lecture streamed to them. You're viral now. I am delighted to welcome back to campus from all over the country and actually all over the world and beyond, faculty who have participated in the Summer Institute for Israel Studies and who've returned to the campus this weekend to participate in tonight's event. It's great to see you back on campus. This is a very special evening on our campus. It is indeed only too rare that we can host such an acclaimed author, activist, and public intellectual. We are honored to have you here this evening. And I believe this is your first visit back to Brandeis since you were awarded an honorary degree in 1998. Another very special day for Brandeis, for which we have very fond memories. The Schusterman Center for Israel Studies, so ably led by Professor Ilan Tron, deserves all of our thanks for making this extraordinary event possible. The center has been active in bringing scholars and writers from Israel to study and teach and lecture on the campus in the 2 short years since its founding in 2007. We have all been enriched by its intellectual contributions to the university, and tonight promises to be yet another memorable contribution. I'm delighted now to ask Professor Tron to introduce our esteemed speaker and to set the stage for the evening. Ilan.
Thanks, Provost Krause. This is a Schusterman Center for Israel Studies event, as you well know, and I want to explain why it is that it's taking place. We're here because of a Schusterman Center for Israel Studies workshop. This evening is the public part of a program designed for the fellows. They've already spent this day in workshops discussing history, memory, and commemoration with Amos Oz, as well with 2 other outstanding scholars, Professor Yoram Bilu and Vered Vinitsky-Sarusi, both of the Hebrew University. Professor Vinitsky-Sarusi is visiting at Yale. We're very privileged that Professor Bilu is spending the semester with us at Brandeis. The fellows come from coast to coast: Canada, Argentina, Brazil, India, Turkey, and Hungary. If we had all of them here, they would come from China to Armenia, Azerbaijan, Ukraine, the UK, Denmark, Ireland, and Egypt. Brandeis has become the most important center in the world for this kind of service to a rapidly growing field. The Summer Institute, misnamed, is an institute that has workshops all year round, and you may have noticed that today is not exactly a summer day. So on your behalf, I would like to welcome all our fellows from where they have come to share in this evening with our esteemed guest. Amos Oz should require little or no introduction to a Brandeis audience. The citation Brandeis presented him when he was granted an honorary doctorate in 1998 states beautifully all the appropriate categories, winner of numerous literary prizes in Israel and abroad. His work has appeared in dozens of languages. He merits the highest honor we can bestow for his contributions as a public intellectual and a vigorous proponent of peace, especially through Peace Now and a variety of political parties and international associations devoted to that purpose. The honorary doctorate he received from his own university, Ben-Gurion University of the Negev, in 2008, eloquently echoes the encomiums offered by Brandeis, but adds an additional tribute. It also applauds him as a teacher who holds the Shai Agnon Chair in Hebrew Literature. It is for that dimension, the superlative educator, for which we have asked him to come to Brandeis. It has taken some time for this event to be realized. A few years ago, at a meeting at Ben Gurion University, where both of us have spent a major portion of our teaching careers, I broached the idea of his coming here to meet with students at Brandeis. I explained that in my classes, as in so many others in and outside of Israel, his writings are an essential part of the curriculum on topics well beyond modern Hebrew literature. Like many others, I was assigning at the time A Tale of Love and Darkness as a kind of text. I instructed my Brandeis students to choose an incident or incidents from this novel for an essay on, the fancy word is, verisimilitude of what Oz relates in his autobiographical novel in the context of what they learned in class and through other readings. It proved to be a productive and enjoyable exercise for students and the reader of their papers. He readily accepted, and today's the product of that agreement. It is then as an educator that Amos Oz has been invited to Brandeis. It is through an extraordinarily rich literature that Amos Oz also reaches beyond classrooms to appreciative audiences across the world in more than 40 languages, and they include translations published in 44 countries, the last time I counted, and there's probably more today. Amos Oz is surely one of the most widely read and appreciated writers in the world. We may then well ask, what do the Chinese, Russian, Turkish, Hungarian, Thai, Greek, Spanish, German, French, and Arabic-speaking audiences find so compelling? Why does this Jerusalem and kibbutz-bred author and public intellectual reach so many and hold their attention? There are surely many answers. Let me offer but one brief explanation that I think may be germane to what we're about to hear this evening in his presentation that he has entitled Israel, A Personal Perspective. Taking the risk of entering into a literary discussion which is not my natural métier, I would say the following. The voice of Amos Oz is that of a restless and unending concern with the ethical and moral in the face of apparently intractable dilemmas. Importantly, we find resilience, stubborn resilience, in the dissonance between utopian dreams and difficult realities. In one of the earliest novels, My Michael, considered by a prestigious international poll to be one of the 100 most significant novels of the 20th century, Hannah, the heroine, opens the book with the following: I am writing this because people I love have died. I am writing this because when I was young, I was full of the power of loving, and now that power of loving is dying. This short opening paragraph then concludes, I do not want to die. In a sense, much of what follows in that work and in subsequent writings over 4 decades ago is the same adamant insistence on resolutely affirming life, the capacity to love, and the insistence on the possibility of being better in a world that itself must improve. The issues may be national, ethnic, class, or gender, the immigration experience, or whatever. Utopian intentions meet the reality of an imperfect world that challenges the actors in the books and stories as well as us, the readers and observers. There is something undoubtedly universal in appeal that extends far beyond those who read Oz in Hebrew and are concerned with the multiple tensions and conflicts of Israel. One final comment. Much of modern Hebrew literature from the mid-19th century has spoken to the nation about large collective issues through the medium of individuals and the apparent particulars of their individual lives. Surely, one of the most important means through which Israeli culture has been shaped and interpreted is through Hebrew literature. As a measure of Israel's national introspection through literature, there may be no country in the world that publishes more books per capita than Israel. This is a partial explanation of why Hebrew language books, from the Bible in the ancient world through the extraordinarily fertility of the present, comprise the 8th largest collection of the many ancient and modern languages found in the Harvard University's Widener Library, one of the great and most comprehensive libraries in the modern world. There are probably few societies that celebrate books and authors as does Israel. Indeed, in Israel, authors may be idealized and canonized even when quite young. When authors write, then, Israelis and others beyond this small country, with its ancient modern language, listen. This is especially the case with Amos Oz. I would conclude with what our author-teacher himself is reported to have said about the reception to one of his recent books, A Tale of Love and Darkness again, and it is clearly true for much else. חפרתי בחצר הפרטית שלי, וכנראה נגעתי בכבל תת-קרקעי. פתאום, האור בכל החלונות התחיל להבהב. I was digging into my own, that is my private backyard, and apparently I struck some underground cable. Suddenly, the lights started blinking on in all the windows of the houses. We shall certainly be fascinated this evening by what Amos Oz uncovers about Israel and shares with us. It is likely, too, that his personal discoveries will illuminate or at least flicker in our own windows. Amos Oz, Israel, A Personal Perspective. Good job.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, good friends, good evening, shalom, erev tov. I wish to thank Madam Provost and Professor Troyan for their wonderful introductions. Actually, I'd be very happy to sit for the rest of this evening in the first row of the auditorium, listen to you introducing me. Countries, nations are born out of geography and out of demography and out of historical and political turbulences. Israel was born out of a dream. This is why it has an unavoidable taste of disappointment about it. It is in the nature of dreams only to remain rosy and perfect and intact and unsullied as long as they are dreams. The moment you carry out, you fulfill a dream, whatever this dream is, whether it is building a house or living out a sexual fantasy or planting a garden or building a nation, the moment you live it out, it's bound to taste like a partial disappointment. So Israel tastes like a disappointment, but this is not about the nature of Israel. This is about the nature of dreams. I just said that Israel was born out of a dream. In fact, it was born out of many dreams, including several conflicting, contradicting, and mutually exclusive dreams. There were almost as many master plans, blueprints, and visions for Israel as there were founding fathers and mothers. The generation of the pioneers used to sing in Hebrew, Sham be'eretz chemdat avot titgashemna kol hatikvot. There in the land of our forefathers, all our hopes will be fulfilled. Note, not just one or two hopes, but all our hopes will be fulfilled. Unfortunately, it's not in the nature of hopes to be fully fulfilled, especially when those hopes are contradictory and mutually exclusive. Let us review just some of those initial visions. There were those among the founding fathers and mothers who wanted to reconstruct ancient biblicality, to revive the kingdoms of David and Solomon, to build a nation of toilers of the land, soldiers and priests, a biblical country. There were others who wanted the new country to become a replica of the East European shtetl. Their offspring to this very day, they come to Israel, they look left and right, and they decree no bagel, no lox, no Jewish country. There were those who opted, like Theodor Herzl, who opted for a middle-class, Germanized Central European paradise, with red-tiled roofs and good manners, and people calling each other Herr Doktor, Frau Direktor, and peace and quiet between 2 and 4 in the afternoon every day, and a lot of Gemütlichkeit. There were still others, like the founders of my own kibbutz, Hulda, who were, how shall I put it? They were semi-religious social anarchists. I know this sounds impossible, but that's as close as I can get. They were not Marxists. They were inspired, greatly inspired by the ideas of Tolstoy and A.D. Gordon. And they wanted to create not a nation with a government and with centralized institutions. They wanted to create in the land of Israel a loose federation of small rural communities where individuals will undergo a religious experience through toiling on the land, being in constant touch with nature, sharing everything with each other, and living a communal life. Semi-religious social anarchists. Next door to them, there live the Marxists, the Zionist Marxists, those founders of HaShomer HaTzair Kibbutzim, who secretly dreamt until as late as 1952 that one day Stalin himself will come for a visit. And they will give Stalin, so they dreamt, they will give Stalin the grand tour of the kibbutz. They will show him the chicken poultry and the cowshed and the children's houses. And then they will drag Stalin to the communal dining hall for a lengthy discussion into the night about Marxism-Leninism, teaching him once and for all in juicy Russian what Marxism-Leninism really means, because they knew better than Stalin. I'm not being ironical. They really knew better than Stalin what Marxism-Leninism meant. And in their fantasy, at the end of the night, they will have Stalin rise on his feet and say to them, bloody Jews, you have done socialism here better than we did in Russia, and then die of happiness. And then there were the Social Democrats, who dreamed for Israel to become an exemplary welfare state, beating Scandinavia at its own game, supported or leaning heavily on a powerful trade union and based on a strong sense of solidarity. And I could go on for the rest of tonight, or even write a trilogy, which I still threaten to do, about the tremendous diversity of visions and master plans and dreams for Israel. What became of all those dreams? Well, many of them are still alive and struggling with each other, sometimes under different banners. Others were fulfilled, and fulfillment, as I said earlier, means partial disappointment. Some have turned into nightmares. But no one of those dreams, or almost no one of them, has been completely erased from the face of the earth. All of them still feed secretly the Israeli society, or should we say the Israeli societies in the plural. There is, of course, a huge difference between the Israel of the CNN and the real Israel. In the Israel of the CNN, what you get to see are roughly 80% religious fanatics and fanatic settlers from the West Bank, 19% cruel soldiers at the roadblocks, and 1% wonderful intellectuals like myself who criticize the government and struggle for peace. But this is far cry from the Israel that I know and the Israel that I'm going to tell you about this evening. There is, of course, Jerusalem, which is a place to itself, a loading stone for extremists and indeed to fanatics of every faith and color and tradition. And Jerusalem is spatial, but somewhat marginal to the Israeli reality. There are the settlements in the West Bank who, despite of the noise and the sound and the fury, represent about 5% of the population of Israel, if not less. And there is the coastal plain Israel, the bulk of the Israelis, where 75 or 80% of the Israelis live a noisy, sweaty, pushy, passionate life, secular to the bone, extremely Mediterranean, warm-hearted, materialistic, bursting with various energies, creative, rather prosperous, with indeed several painful pockets of poverty, misery, seclusion, exclusion, and rejection. But this coastal plain Israel is a very Mediterranean country. a far cry from Herzl's vision about an Austro-Hungary in the heart of the Middle East, a far cry from the Marxist paradise of the Stalinists, a far cry from the semi-religious social funders of my kibbutz. But in a sense, it's a society which has a lot of charm, at least for me. It has a lot of charm because it's a very noisy, passionate, and argumentative society. We are a nation of 7 million citizens now, 7 million prime ministers, 7 million prophets and messiahs, each and every one of us with his or her personal formula for instant redemption. Everyone shouts at the tops of their voices all the time. No one ever listens. Except for me, I listen sometimes, that's how I make a living. But if you promise to take the following with a big grain of salt, I'm going to tell you that Israel is neither a country nor a nation. Rather, it is a fiery collection of arguments. Every line by a bus stop in Israel is likely to catch a spark and turn into a passionate street seminary about politics and history and military and security and religion, with the participants of such a street seminary, total strangers, while disagreeing with each other over political and metaphysical good and evil, are nonetheless elbowing their way to the top of the line. You will figure out from the way I speak about Israel that I love this country even at times when I don't like it. In fact, I love it even when I can't stand it. And there are many moments, especially in recent times, when I can't stand it. But such a juxtaposition, loving without being able to stand someone, is common in the best of families. As I said, it's an argumentative society. It's deeply diverse. It's a verbal society, a talkative society, a screamy society, where you never get two Israelis to agree with each other on anything. In fact, excuse me, it's not easy to get one to agree with himself or herself, because everyone is ambivalent and everyone has a divided mind and soul. This, excuse me, thank you. This, I'm going to suggest, is the answer to the question, what is Jewish about Israel? A question which, to my bewilderment, I sometimes hear here and there in America and in other diasporas. What is Jewish about Israel? Well, the diversity, being a collection of arguments. You know, my friends, the Jews never had a pope, and it's not for nothing they never had a pope. If anyone ever calls himself or herself the Pope of the Jews, everybody will be approaching this Pope, slapping him or her on the back, saying, "Hi, Pope, you don't know me and I don't know you, but my grandfather and your uncle used to do business together back in Minsk or back in Casablanca, and therefore you be quiet for just 10 minutes and let me tell you once and for all, what is it that God really wants of us?" But this has been the nature of the Jewish culture right from the word go. It's a civilization of doubt and argument, and so it will remain, and so it will prosper despite of the terrible noises it's making. And it's making terrible noises, and this is part of the bargain. There has been an open-ended game for thousands of years, an open-ended game of interpretations, reinterpretations, and counter-interpretations. This has been the name of the game until very recently, until the Orthodox or ultra-Orthodox Judaism stagnated completely in Eastern Europe some 300 years ago. Before that, it was sound and fury, endless argument. No rabbi was ever regarded, or almost ever regarded, as the ultimate authority for his generation. He would always be challenged by a rival. There will always be a diversity. There will always be a disagreement. There will always be, or always have been, various interpretations. I know this sounds scary to some people. Some Jewish people are very nervous about it. Some Jewish people here in America say to me very often, Can't you Israelis do us a favor and keep your differences to yourselves? At least when you appear abroad, keep your differences to yourselves. You are embarrassing us in front of our non-Jewish neighbors by your diversities. Well, no deal, my friends. For me, one of the major significances of being a citizen of the free state of the Jewish people is that at long last I can conduct my disagreements with the next Jew at the top of my voice and the hell with the neighbors. That's independence for you. There has been an element of latent anarchism throughout Jewish history, in Jewish civilization, until the stagnation of 300 years ago. Jews were arguing and challenging not only each other, they were in the constant habit of disagreeing with God and challenging God. Think of the ancient story of Abraham bargaining with God over the destiny of the sinful of Sodom like a shrewd second-hand car dealer. 50 righteous men, 40 righteous men, 30, 20, maybe 10. And when he loses the argument, he does not fall to his knees and apologize for his chutzpah. Oh no, he turns his eyes upwards and pronounce the daring words, Hashofet kol haaretz lo yaseh mishpat. Would not the judge of all the earth do right? In other words, you, God, may be the chief executive, but you are not above the law. You, God, may be the legislator, but you cannot tamper with your own laws. The law is above you. This has been the foundation rock of the Jewish tradition. And this arguing with God repeats itself in the book of Job, and repeats itself in the words of the prophets, and repeats itself in the Talmud. I cannot help but digress for a moment and tell you my all-time favorite Talmud story, episode. It's about two saintly rabbis, Rabbi Yehoshua and Rabbi Elazar, who disagree on a certain somewhat boring point of interpreting the law, interpreting the Torah. Tanuro shel Achnai, Achnai's oven. And they argue for 7 days and 7 nights. They don't eat, they don't sleep, they don't drink, they argue. And they cannot decide. After 7 days and 7 nights, God Almighty has mercy on them, knowing that they will die arguing. And a bat call, a voice is heard from above. Rabbi Elazar is right, Rabbi Yehoshua is wrong, go to sleep. Go to sleep is not in the text, but it is in the context. This is not the end of the story. The loser turns his eyes upwards, saying, Nitna Torah livnei Adam. In other words, you have given the Torah to human beings. In other words, please keep out of this. And this is not the end of the story either. Another bat call, another voice is heard from above, saying, Nitzchuni banai, my sons have defeated me. In other words, touche. I love this story, I cherish it. Now this continues. You will find in the 18th century Hasidic rabbis suing God to appear before a rabbinical court of justice to justify his conduct in the world. God, of course, never appears because he would lose the case. This continues into the 20th century, into contemporary Israel, into present-day Israeli poetry. Yehuda Amichai writes in a famous poem, El male rachamim, ilmale ha'el male rachamim, hayu harachamim ba'olam velo rak bo. And in my simple translation, the Lord is full of mercy. Were he not so full of mercy, there may have been some mercy in the world, not just in him. This, ladies and gentlemen, is unthinkable in Christianity, unthinkable in Islam, unthinkable probably, I don't know enough about other religions, but probably unthinkable in many other religions. But this is the essence of Judaism. Argue, disagree, beg to differ, reinterpret, counterinterpret. And this is the essence of Israeli society. I know it's not easy, and especially when it's hovering on the verge of violence, and violence is the end of everything. Violence is the end of the argument, the end of the debate, the end of the diversity, the end of the plurality, the end of the cultural riches, the end of everything. And we hover on the edge of violence, but relatively speaking, we have been internally a non-violent society, relatively speaking. Bear in mind that other nations, including this blessed America, have only succeeded to establish their rules of the game through bloody civil wars, through rivers of blood and fire. France became France through the guillotines. Phlegmatic England became England through a bloody religious war. Our civil wars in Israel are 95 or 99% verbal civil war. We call each other terrible names, thus giving each other ulcers and heart attacks. In short, a traditional Jewish battle. Now, I believe there are two strict conditions for the future of Israel, and I think the future of Israel depends entirely on those two conditions. One is the need to renew and revive the sense of social solidarity in Israeli society. We have greatly lost this sense of solidarity. In Jewish communities in the diaspora for centuries, for millennia, there were poor people and there were rich people, but no one ever starved to death. There were poor people and there were rich people, but no one was left illiterate. Everyone got some education. Israel is failing this test right now because our solidarity, our internal solidarity is weakening. There is a kind of selfishness about Israeli society or Israeli societies, which worries me a great deal. There are, however, some syndromes of a change, especially among young Israelis, especially among idealist young Israelis. But there are some syndromes of change, some syndromes of moving back toward more solidarity, more social solidarity, which are too early to celebrate, but which I regard cautiously as encouraging. The other precondition is to terminate the Israeli occupation of the West Bank and terminate the feud with the Arabs and with the Palestinians. This is crucial. This is for Israel a question of life and death, because the lasting conflict and the lasting occupation of the West Bank is deeply corrupting the Israeli society, deeply changing the minds and the hearts of the Israeli, making them more fanatical, more extremist, more selfish, and not unlinked with the previous issue that I just raised, the issue of internal solidarity. It has a certain consequence, a certain reflection on the lack of internal solidarity. Now, I said many times, and I will repeat this each time I speak to an audience in this country or in any country, I regard the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians as a tragedy in the ancient Greek sense of the word tragedy, a clash between right and right. Admittedly, sometimes, especially recently, it's a clash between wrong and wrong. The Palestinians are in Palestine because Palestine is the homeland of the Palestinians in the same sense that Norway is the homeland of the Norwegians and Greece the homeland of the Greeks. The Israeli Jews are in Israel for exactly the same reason. There has never been a country in history where the Jews as a people, as a nation, could call home. As individuals, yes, of course, but not as a nation and not as a people. So they have the Palestinians have no other country, and the Israelis have no other country either. The country is very small. It's about the size of the state of New Jersey. I know the fuss and the noise it's making about itself makes you think it's like China, but it's a very, very small country. And it will have to become smaller. The Palestinian claim for Palestine is valid and convincing and holding truth, just as much as the Israeli claim for Israel is valid and powerful and holding truth. But these are two mutually exclusive conclusions, and the only possibility to resolve those two mutually exclusive claims is a painful compromise. And compromise is going to be painful for both Israelis and Palestinians. I know the word compromise is not very popular with young idealists. Many young idealists tend to think that compromise is dishonest. Compromise is opportunistic. Compromise is a lack of a backbone. Not in my vocabulary. In my vocabulary, the word compromise is synonymous with the word life. And where there is life, there are compromises. And the opposite of compromise is not idealism, and the opposite of compromise is not integrity. The opposite of compromise is fanaticism and death. And I know one or two things about compromises, having been married to the same woman for almost 50 years. So yes, we need a compromise. We need a compromise, and we need to resolve the issues, and the issues can be resolved. If I were negotiating on behalf of Israel, and I am not, of course, and I don't think I have a chance to ever be negotiating with the Palestinians on behalf of Israel, but if I were negotiating with the Palestinians on behalf of Israel, I would make the solution of the 48 Palestinian refugee problem the prime Israeli provision for an agreement with the Palestinians, for selfish reasons, not for altruistic reasons, and not necessarily for guilt, but for selfish reasons. As long as those hundreds of thousands of Palestinian refugees are rotting in camps in dehumanizing, terrible conditions, and they have been rotting in these camps for 60 years, as long as they are in these camps, Israel will have no security and no peace, even if it has a signed peace treaty. Now, those Palestinians cannot go into Israel proper, because if they go into Israel proper, there will be two Palestinian states and not one state for the Jewish people. Their problem ought to be resolved in the state of Palestine. Each one of them needs a home, a job, and a passport, a nationality. This is not immensely difficult. This is not unthinkable. We are not talking the whole of Africa. We are not talking the whole of the third world. We are talking some 700,000 human beings, which means 250,000 jobs and a similar number of homes for the Palestinians. This could be carried out by a joint effort of the international community, Europe, America, Israel, yes, Israel, and the rich Arab countries. They could pull this together easily. So the issue of the refugees. There are other issues which divide Israelis from Palestinians. There is boundaries and settlements and security and Jerusalem, the issue of the holy places in Jerusalem. But I am a bearer of good tidings. I know you all get the bad news from Israel all the time. Let me share with you some good news. This good news is not on the CNN because it's not an event. It's a development. It's a process. And the good news is that the vast majority of the Israeli Jews and the vast majority of the Palestinian Arabs know now that in the end of the day there will be partition and two states. They are not happy about it, neither in Israel nor in Palestine, but they know it. If you passed a public opinion survey or a referendum asking every individual between the Mediterranean and the River Jordan, every individual, Israeli Jew, Israeli Palestinian, Palestinian, everyone, not what is your preferable position, not what would you regard as a just a solution, not even what would you regard as a secure solution. But if you simply asked everybody, what do you think is going to happen in the end of the day? The vast majority, maybe 70 or 80%, and I base my words on public opinion surveys both in Israel and in Palestine, the vast majority on both sides will say a partition and a two-state solution. And some on both sides will immediately add, and this will be a disaster, and this will be the end of everything, and this will be a crying injustice. But they know. They know it in Israel, they know it in Palestine, and the reason is very simple. There are 5.5 million Israeli Jews. There are 4.5 Palestinians in the occupied territories. There are 1.5 million Palestinian Arabs inside Israel who are citizens of the State of Israel. They cannot all become one happy family because they are not one, and because they are not happy, and because they are not family either. They are two unhappy families. And the only solution is not a sudden honeymoon. I don't believe in sudden honeymoons between nations after lasting conflicts. I don't believe in a scene out of Dostoevsky with long-lost brothers hugging each other in tears, saying to each other, "Oh, brother, will you ever forgive me?" take the country, who cares about the country, give me your love and forgiveness. This is not going to happen. The best we can hope for is a clenched teeth compromise, a clenched teeth partition, which is going to feel like an amputation both for Israelis and for Palestinians. Look at the Czechs and the Slovaks. They did it peacefully. They separated the Czech Republic from the Slovak Republic in peaceful means and without any bloodshed, because they have decided they are no longer one family. This, I think, is unavoidable. I can't give you a date. It's hard to be a prophet coming from the land of the prophets. There is too much competition in the prophecy business. But I can give you one prediction. One day, there will be a Palestinian embassy in Israel and an Israeli embassy in Palestine, and those two embassies will be... You may be too hasty to clap your hands. You may not like what I'm going to say in the continuation of the same sentence. Those two embassies are going to be walking distance from each other, because one of them will be in East Jerusalem and the other one in West Jerusalem. You are still clapping. Good. I know there is the painful issue of the holy places in Jerusalem, which seems irresolute. My old grandmother, my wonderful grandmother Shlomit, the one who died of cleanliness. When I was a little boy of 5 or 6, she explained to me in simple words the difference between Jew and Christian, not between Jew and Muslim, but between Jew and Christian. And she said, you see, my boy, the Christians believe that the Messiah have been here once and he will come again one day. We Jews believe that the Messiah is still to come. Over this, said my grandmother, you cannot imagine, my boy, how much persecution and hatred and bloodshed. Why, she said, why can't everybody simply wait and see? If the Messiah comes saying, hello, it's nice to see you again, the Jews will have to apologize to the Christians. If, on the other hand, the Messiah comes saying, how do you do, it's good to meet you, the entire Christian world will have to apologize to the Jews. Until then, she suggested, live and let live. And this is the only feasible answer to the question of the disputed holy places in Jerusalem. Let everyone have free access to the holy places. Let everyone worship. Let spatial arrangements be made and inspected by whoever, so that everyone can worship in those holy places, and let no flag wave over those disputed holy places until the Messiah comes and tells us that Hinduism is the best religion or whatever. Now, time to say something about Europe. And I have this on my mind for a long time, because Europe is endlessly wagging its finger, both at the Israelis and at the Palestinians. Aren't you ashamed to be such terrible oppressors? Aren't you ashamed to be such terrible terrorists? Shame on you and shame on you, like an old-fashioned Victorian headmistress. Now, when I think of the European context of the conflict in the Middle East, I have to tell you that this conflict is largely, vastly, a result of European conduct. Both the Jews and the Arabs were victimized by Europe in two different ways. The Arabs through colonialism, imperialism, exploitation, and humiliation. The Jews through persecution, discrimination, and ultimately mass murder on an unprecedented scale. Now, you would have thought that two victims, especially two victims of the same oppressor, develop a sense of solidarity between them and march together to the barricades chanting the songs of Bertolt Brecht. But in real life, some of the worst conflict that I have seen, individual conflict as well as national conflicts, are precisely the conflicts between two victims of the same oppressor. Two children of the same abusing parent do not necessarily love one another. They often see in each other the image and the reflection of the abusing parent. And this is precisely what happens between Israelis and Arabs. The Arabs are looking at us Israelis. They don't see us as what we really are, a bunch of semi-hysterical survivors and refugees. No, they see us as an extension of the white, oppressing, sophisticating, colonizing Europe of the 19th century. We Israelis look at the Arabs, we don't see them as what they are, a defeated civilization, a haunted civilization. We see them very often as a new image of our past oppressors, Cossacks, pogrom makers, Nazis who wrap themselves in kaffias and grew mustaches, but they are in the same old game of cutting Jewish throats for fun. This is not a misunderstanding. This is a result of the impact of Europe on both sides, which burdens Europe, I believe, with a spatial responsibility for the future of both, for the welfare of both. And both Israelis and Palestinians are going to need all the encouragement they can get, because they are going to undergo a painful surgery. Painful it's going to be. As I said earlier, the patient is reluctantly ready for the surgery. The doctors are cowards. There is a lack of leadership on both sides. There is a lack of leadership on both sides. I mean, the people know what is coming and what has to happen. They will not be dancing in the streets, neither in Israel nor in Palestine, when the two-state solution is implemented, but they know it. All we need now is a bold, courageous leadership to carry out what is necessary to be done. The patient is ready for the amputation. The doctors are cowards. Now, let me conclude by telling you about a certain aspect of Israel which escapes the news completely because it's not about Israelis and Palestinians. I think Israel is undergoing a golden age of creativity in literature, in cinema, in music, in the theater, in the visual arts, in the science, in high tech, in technology in general. Israel is undergoing a wonderful time. Obviously, you don't normally know that you live in a golden age when you live in a golden age. You know it when the golden age is gone, when it's over. Then you remember it with nostalgia and you say those were the days. In terms of cultural and scientific and creative activity, Israel is a wonderful place right now. Noisy and screamy, yes, but a wonderful place. So much is going on in the literary scene, in the artistic scene, in the scientific scene, in the technological scene, that I am sometimes amazed how such a small country can produce so much. Think just of the cinema, of the Israeli cinema of the last 10 years, how it's moved to the forefront of world cinema with some excellent productions. So we will go on arguing and debating. Don't you people ever be too nervous about the Israeli diversities. They are the right climate for creativity, as long as they are non-violent. I am a great believer in diversity, and I am a great believer in sound and fury, and I don't believe in a harmonized society where everybody is quiet between 2 and 4 in the afternoon. Thank you very much for your patience and your tolerance. Thank you. Thank you.
We are now commanded not to disappoint our distinguished guest. We're to ask him questions and perhaps even engage in a few disputes. Let's see if we can make him happy. Who would like to be first? Yes. You need to have a microphone, and you have to say who you are, and what department you belong to, and when you anticipate getting your Brandeis degree.
I have a son that graduated. Is that okay?
It certainly is, as long as he pays his tuition.
My name is Ido Elam. I'm Israeli, living here, and I have a question for Amos about the leadership problem. I mean, obviously, you mentioned that both sides don't have the right leadership, and I see fanatism in the leadership on both sides. If it's the Hamas on one side, I don't want to say which side is on the other side, but do you see that trend to a more fanatic, both on the Palestinian and the Israelis? How do you see that resolved to go toward what 70 or 80% of both sides want to happen?
Well, the spread of fanaticism among both Arabs, Palestinian Arabs and Israelis. Yes, there are different sets of clocks ticking simultaneously. Let us never forget that although Hamas carried the Palestinian elections of 4 years ago, it never won a majority. In fact, it only carried 32 or 33% of the electorate, whereas 70%, nearly 70% of the Palestinians voted against Hamas. It's only a result of a very twisted electoral system that Hamas had prevailed in those elections. Now 30% of pro-fanatic voters is a lot. And there is a fanatic constituency in Israel as well, extremist and uncompromising. But nonetheless, the majority is ready. The question where the leadership will come from is, of course, a mysterious question. In this respect, I believe in surprises. I think history is full of surprises. Whoever dreamt that it will be Winston Churchill of all people who will dismantle the British Empire? Whoever believed that Charles de Gaulle will take France out of North Africa? Charles de Gaulle of all people. Whoever believed that Gorbachev will dismantle the Soviet bloc? Whoever believed that Anwar Sadat will come to Jerusalem stretching his hand for peace and that Menachem Begin would comply and reciprocate to this peace proposal? So I can't tell you who will be the leader or the leaders on both sides who will do it. Maybe they don't know it yet, but they will come. How soon, I don't know. It's a bloody question. It's a bleeding question. But the appropriate leader will arise sooner or later.
To the other extreme. Your name, your department, and don't miss the fact that you're a Schusterman Fellow.
Hi, my name is Ofir Abu. I'm a fourth-year PhD student in the politics department here at Brandeis, and I'm a Schusterman Fellow. First of all, thank you for coming. It's a great honor. I want to ask you about the self-criticism or the diverse society that Israel is, and I'm an Israeli citizen. I'm Israeli. I was born in Israel, of course. I want to ask you, it seems like it's a bit problematic to think in those terms, especially in this time. As you see, the president of the State of Israel criticizing Justice Goldstone for the report and calling him a little man. And it seems to me that I want to ask you if Israelis are really self-criticism, or is it just that we like to criticize everybody else but not ourselves?
Well, you can't give a comprehensive answer about all Israelis. Some Israelis are very self-critical, some are not. Some are critical of the others, and most of them are critical of each other. The response to the Goldstone report in Israel was quite divided. There were people in Israel, indeed a minority, who were critical not only of the Israeli invasion of Gaza, but of the entire idea behind this invasion. The majority of the Israelis endorsed it. When the Goldstone report came out, was published, the majority of the Israelis felt gutsily against the report without bothering to read it. There was a minority of Israelis who said, let's do our own interrogation and find the just history of this war, let's do it ourselves. So the Israelis are as divided about this as they are about everything. Criticism, yes, they prefer to criticize one another than to receive criticism.
Please. My name is John Stachel. Wait a minute. You don't have a name till you have a microphone.
Thank you. My name is John Stachel. I'm director of the Center for Einstein Studies at Boston University. My son went to Brandeis University and graduated from here. I want to remind you of things I'm sure you know. There's another tradition in Judaism of intolerance. I remind you of the exclusion of people like Uriel Acosta and Baruch Spinoza. So I think there's another strand in the Jewish tradition we have to take account of, particularly today. And it's perhaps no accident that, as Isaac Deutscher pointed out, some of the most vital contributions to our contemporary civilization have come from those he calls the non-Jewish Jews, those who have liberated themselves from the Jewish tradition, people like Marx, like Freud, and like Einstein. But the question I wanted to ask you is about this. It's a very engaging picture you paint of a nation of shlemiels and schlemazels debating over everything. But I remind you what we all know, that Israel has the atomic bomb. And the man who first made this public, Mr. Vanunu, was persecuted, arrested for many years, and I believe is still harassed. How do you fit this into your picture of Israel? Shouldn't this be a subject of intense debate in Israel and in the world?
Yes, I think the issue of nuclear armament of Israel should be open to debate, and you will be surprised that there is in recent years more and more debate, not enough debate, but more and more debate about it in Israel. Vanunu happens not to be my hero, but that belongs in a different opera, and I'm only one among 7 million Israelis, so we have many opinions. Essentially, I think you are right about the tradition of intolerance among the Jews, and there existed and still exists such tradition. But only in the last 300 years, this intolerance and stagnation prevailed over other traditions. So I will hope that the tradition of diversity and the tradition of argument and the tradition of debate and the tradition of differing will prevail as it is prevailing now, at least in the coastal plain Israel.
I'll give it to you. It's all right.
My name is Ariel Marks. I'm a senior here at Brandeis. Sorry guys, I feel like I'm facing. I'm a senior at Brandeis. I am a bio major. Thank you for coming. So you spoke about the phenomenon that you've recognized of a lack of solidarity that is prevailing in Israel, and the beginnings of a counter to that and a re-solidaritization of that. And you didn't go into much detail of it and of how that is occurring. That is a big problem in Israel about the gap between the rich and the poor and the education system. And so what is happening in Israel to change that?
Well, as I said, in terms of solidarity within Israeli society or Israeli societies, the situation is not good. The kind of loose solidarity which existed in early Israel, and I don't idealize early Israel on anything, not even on solidarity, but the kind of loose solidarity which did exist in early Israel, at least in parts of the Israeli society, seemed to loosening even more. There are, as I said, as I indicated, I didn't really expand on this, there are some syndromes of change among young Israelis, among groups of idealists, among those who are establishing, for example, kibbutzim ironiyim, city kibbutzes, in troubled parts of Israel, in less privileged parts of Israel, and are doing much more than just social work because they are actually integrating with troubled and unfortunate communities in Israel. So there are signs and syndromes, but of course it's much too early to celebrate a change, and I'm still very, very worried about the issue of solidarity or lack of solidarity in Israeli society.
Please, will somebody bring Mr. Ringel a microphone? Now you say your name.
Joseph Ringel, a PhD student at the Near Eastern and Judaic Studies Department. And everybody here? Okay. As a student of rabbinics, I had a question for you as in terms of the way you were using the term Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox, 300 years of stagnation. If I were a bit more nuanced in that, I could tell you that examples of intolerance existed a lot longer than 300 years ago. I can bring up the Maimonidean controversy as just one example. And if I wanted to talk about some of the great rabbinic works, I could talk about even this century, some of the greatest rabbinic thinkers that lived. Can you please just expand a little bit more on what you mean by stagnation and the kind of communities that you're discussing? And the second question is also, you had mentioned what you thought Israel should do, what you thought, a little bit more about what you thought Europe should do, a little bit less, a little bit of what the Arab countries should do. Can you please expand on what you think the Palestinians need to do?
Yes, these are two major questions. One of them about the stagnation. The stagnation began precisely when the rule that the Jews never had a pope was replaced by local popes and local kind of charismatic religious authorities which were beyond refute and beyond argument. And this happened in Eastern Europe about 300 years ago, give or take. I never forget, and I don't let anyone forget, that in the Middle Ages, in Spain and in other countries, there were religious Jews, in fact rabbis, who wrote extremely secular and hedonistic poetry. They even wrote sensual poetry. They even wrote sexual poetry, openly sexual poetry. They even wrote openly homosexual poetry, and they were not boycotted, and they were not de-rabbied, and they were not excommunicated. So there existed different times in Judaism and different traditions and different manifestations. Now about what should the Palestinians do? The Palestinians should renounce their dream of greater Palestine, just like the Israelis ought to renounce their dream of greater Israel. The Palestinians should accept, I believe, officially the idea of a two-state solution and accept the need to resolve the problem of the Palestinian refugees in the future state of Palestine and not inside Israel. These would be my requirements if I were negotiating with the Palestinians.
Please, a question down in the front row. Down to her, please.
Thank you. My name is Dania Shapira. I actually have a question that is related to solidarity, because if we want solidarity, it should be based on both, let's say all sides, and I'm not talking about Palestinians, I'm talking in Israel. And what is happening that all the time, at least in talk, the left attacks the right and the right attacks the left, and so on. What happens that the left takes upon itself to be the representative to the world, and like we have the organization Brit Tzedek V'Shalom, and they actually announced that they are going, and they asked people to sign petitions and give to Obama to put a pressure on Israel to do this or to do that. And the question if this should take place, or we have to do it at home, to decide at home what we do, and then discuss it.
Well, if I understand the question correctly, it's primarily a question about the right of non-Israeli Jews to criticize Israel or to even actively work against the policy, the official policy of the government of Israel.
And Israelis to persuade.
And Israelis to persuade. Well, I don't think Israelis have any business, any particular business, persuading Americans to do this or to do that, except in the general way of sharing the experience of Israel with American Jews. But essentially, I think there exists a kind of cousinship between American Jews and Israeli Jews, and this cousinship should be open to mutual screaming. It doesn't necessarily mean that we Israelis always have to abide by what American friends are telling us to do or American Jews are telling us to do, or vice versa. But we should listen. And I think we should be in the business of listening to each other carefully all the time. That's the short answer. The long answer to this question is too long for this evening.
One more question. Oh my goodness. Please, students get priority.
Hi, thanks for coming. My name is Jonah Weissman. I'm a doctoral student in applied physics at Harvard. I was doing some collaborative work over the past year with the Weizmann Institute of Science, and I noticed while I was there that the faculty is seeing a slight increase in the number of, for example, Jews of Iraqi descent, but the student body remains largely homogeneously Ashkenazi. So this made me think of your book, In the Land of Israel, where you gave voice to many of the ethnic and political minorities in Israel And my question is, how has the situation for them changed since you wrote the book, and what new challenges remain to be faced by new minorities?
I think of all the many problems of Israel that I tried to reflect in the land of Israel in 1982, we are still living most of those problems as open and as unresolved as they were in 1982. Maybe the issue of ethnic background of the Israeli Jews themselves is fading by comparison to the issue between Israeli Jews and Israeli Palestinian Arabs. This issue is becoming more acute and more urgent. But this, in my view, does not detract from the urgency of the question of Ashkenazi Sephardi diversity. And this is still one of the main burning issues on the Israeli agenda. I don't have a magic formula on how to resolve it. I don't think there is a way that I can imagine or that I can think that this problem could be resolved. But I think it has to do with the actual distribution of wealth in Israeli society between the rich and the poor. And this distribution of wealth is unhealthy, and it's getting even more unhealthy in the recent years. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I'm not taking any more questions, but this is my second lecture this afternoon, and I'm getting a little bit tired of hearing my own voice. Thank you very much.